Welcome to Equal Inspired, the inclusive podcast, brought to you by Equal IT. Sangeeta Krishnan joins us, who is an engaging business intelligence and analytics leader that possesses a winning blend of subject matter expertise and practical experiences from a variety of industries. She has worked with Fortune 500 organisations, not-for-profits and everything in between, helping various organisations build their operations and monetizing data products from the ground up. Sangeeta is a public speaker, content creator, having various articles published in industry journals, and the author of Thriving in a Data World, which was published in December 2022.
Thanks for the introduction. Happy to be here.
We're really happy to have you. And just on the theme of all things equal inspired, we would love to start by knowing who or what is inspiring you at the moment.
A lot of people and a lot of things. And I'm also following the news about ChatGPT and how much we have come a long way in terms of artificial intelligence. AI is something I was taught. I have a master's in computer science. So that was a course I took and I have learned about it. But it was never like to a scale or a feasibility for regular people to go and play with it. So AI was always like this research kind of a thing. There can be like an expert system that could be built. So we studied all these things, but the practicality of it was not. So it's working in data space, it's a cool thing. So that inspires you like, oh, generative AI is like the dream is coming as close as it can into the reality.
To be in that journey and see the growth, the development must be really exciting for you being in the data space. And if we was to get the magnifying glass into your experience, how would you define your expertise and your focus?
I started off as a software developer. So I was a coder myself for a couple of years. I've held like different kind of roles in different places. I worked in more like product management, data visualization, the core ETL, which is more of the back end. So I've done all. So if I have to pick one, it will be tough for me. But if I have to pick like a area, I would say data storytelling and data visualization is something I really enjoy. The reason being, ETL is extremely important. If you don't have the data ingested, there's not much you can visualize or you can tell a story. But the area I like more happens to be data storytelling, because it's not like just about bringing in all the data and pulling and putting in some kind of a PowerPoint or a visualization tool or any kind of a slide deck, whatever your way of mode of communicating is. It is more like the story you can make sure your audience understands. So it's the understanding of the audience, which is very important. It is not your skills of the visualization. That is how I see the distinction. So that's an area I really enjoy, because everybody's way of understanding, even if you show a same chart or same visual, people interpret. You have a room full of people, everybody's knowledge and everybody's way of interpreting will be very different. If you show the same visual and ask like 50 people in your room, you'll be surprised how much the answer, like you would think like, oh, it's very evident, this is what I'm showing, but actually not. I mean, everybody walks away. So it's very important when you're having a presentation happening, it is very important to make sure your audience is following the same way you think you're showing. So that's an area I like about it.
You mentioned that you actually started your career developing, coding. And I'm just curious, what really inspired the journey from going from developer to analytics?
In my school years, statistics is something which interested me. I was good at it and it interested me as well. So working a couple of years, I did like a lot of web development and all kinds of development actually. So after that, it was during the time when there were a lot of data being collected and the opportunity presented in the company I was working for. And I took it because that is something, that curiosity mindset, like, oh, I've been doing development this long. This is something good for me, a different change and different something for me to try. And after that, I made a good choice and I was happy and I continued more and I evolved more in that journey. Many times, many people, when they talk about data, people talk in terms of like, oh, it's a career choice for everyone. I'm going to take a little different approach. I'm going to be more honest and say that maybe not, because for some people it's not. If you like things like a lot of creativity, curiosity as a natural personality of yours, problem solving, and continuous learning, basically, right? Because this is an evolving area. If all the four words I mentioned are for you, you would feel like very comfortable in that space because it's constantly changing and you're a very curious person, because sometimes you enter some data products with lots of unknowns. If you're a person who prefers something very finely defined for you, very stable, this may not be a choice for such people. That's my opinion. And so I fit in perfectly because I'm by nature more on a curious side. So I have to know like what is happening. So I don't, I'm okay if there is stability, but I'm perfectly fine if there is a lot of unknowns. That doesn't bother me.
Just thinking about that journey and that transition, if you had to think about some of the challenges, the hurdles that you overcome to get to where you are now, what does that look like?
There is a lot of information available. That is a challenge. I mean, sometimes you would think that's a positive, but yes and no, because it is not like the olden days, right? You had to pick a textbook or something to learn. There are so many YouTube channels, there are so many online courses, there are so many ways to learn, and there is so much of information. So I think one of the challenges when people try to make the shift from whatever, develop a database, very core database background to a more data visualization or something in a professional chain. So one thing I feel is people overwhelm themselves because we all, at the end of the day, we all have personal lives too, right? It's not like you'll be sitting weekend and everything. I mean, if that is you, it's fine, but that cannot be mentioned like everybody has to do it. We all have to balance that, like learning and working, personal, family choices. So I would say that is one of the struggles because it's not a field where you learn something, you enter it, and you're done. It is very, very evolving. So you have to be prepared to allocate some time to learn and sometimes draw the line that, okay, I'm not going to become an expert about everything, right? I cannot learn all these 15 tools that's available. Something you have to pick, like you have to get some exposure about something, but before mastering something, you have to know, like, okay, I tried these four things, but I think out of the four things I tried, this is one thing I think I will do good at it. Both answers you have to have. I mean, sometimes you may like to do something, but you're not good at it. And maybe that's who you are. So if you find a match, like, okay, this is something I enjoy and I'm good at it too, that's one area. So that is a struggle I see a lot of people trying to enter. They overwhelm themselves and then they're kind of very lean rather than experts in anything. Because again, it's like this information is overwhelming. It's sometimes tough to know where to stop and what to say. No, I'm not going to take this course. This is not a certification I care about. And sometimes people spend a lot of time about getting too certified too. Certification is good to learn, no doubt, but that by itself is not enough. So you have to draw the line. Okay, I have this one certification. I got the exposure I needed. I'm not going to add four more to my resume or anything, right? So that's the struggle.
Okay, so it's about finding that sweet spot of practical, theoretical, combining the two together. I resonate a lot with what you say about at times almost feeling overwhelmed where there's so much information out there. It is like, where do I begin?
Yeah, I see it as like a Lego box or like a, learning is like, little bit of blocks. Like, yeah, I cannot have this whole pyramid built, right? I'm going to start somewhere small. I'll add on to it bit by bit over 6 months. I'll have it. And that's sometimes for some people, that's a very tough line to draw. They just want everything to be done in 3 weeks. That's not practically possible.
Yeah, we want things done yesterday a lot of the time because of how fast everything is evolving. And sometimes the pressures externally from the market or people around us, we want to get to that point a lot faster. From your side, how did you actually go about that then? What were those initial steps that you took for learning, for transitioning?
I was more organized in my approach, I would say. I kind of knew what are the things I knew and what are the things I didn't, and I will get to it kind of a mindset. And learning also, I'm a big book reader as well, so I didn't overwhelm by like picking every book. We all have books we have started and not finished, right? So this happens to everyone at some point of times, but how I overcome that is like have more like a calendar, right? Where I said, okay, this is the time I'm allocating, and at that time, I'm going to stop. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to go on and on. And also, I had like a balance of meetup groups, right? So, local meetup groups or virtual meetup groups. I was part of some of the virtual meetup groups and also in person sometimes. So, I allocated. So, my learning was not just reading from a book. So it was like a bit of conference, bit of meetups who were, I mean, when I was entering that, and people were experts already, right? So you're kind of tapping on that knowledge, not directly like you're not going to go and talk to each one, but these kind of meetup forum, and which is more informal too. So I didn't want always a conference kind of a setup. So I balanced my learning around, and also a job itself, right? The kind of projects you're handling that kind of gives you an exposure to. But I didn't overwhelm. Even after working so many years in any profession, there are things you won't know, and it's okay. You don't have to know every answer. Sometimes it's okay if somebody asks you something and you're like, oh, this is not an area I have thought about it. I will get back to you. That's fine. So that was my plan. So it was not just book reading, it was not just certification. I kind of did a bit of all, and I was very clear about this is the time commitment I'm going to do. So I didn't feel burnt out very fast because of that.
The conferences and meetups, they're such a powerful way to meet new people, to learn new things, to build a support system as well if you're going into a new industry or space.
When you meet like people in a conference or a meetup, it is very obvious, right? I mean, sometimes when you're sitting yourself or wherever, you kind of feel this is a problem, oh, so unique. And the more you interact with people, this is not an analytical problem you're the only one facing. There are some people, maybe not exactly what you're facing, but very similar. So you can tap onto that knowledge, how they have addressed. So that kind of journey helped me because I could kind of tap on somebody else's expertise and try to say, oh, this is how you solve, whether it's time, cost, however that solution was. So to come up and say, okay, my problem could be solved like this. So this was very helpful, and that built on my analytical journey.
What other skills have you found to be really helpful to excel in an analytics career?
One of the most overlooked skills is communication, because for many people, analytics is all about either dashboards or it's about data in some form, building a model, or one of those, like some form of technical expertise. And when you see and when you look in the market of training, most of it is in that area too. Either they'll pick a tool and teach you in and out of that tool to make you an expert in that, or they will show you a curriculum where it say you should know all this like from a data perspective. One thing which is very important in my opinion to succeed is not just you, I mean, you need to have some kind of proficiency in terms of like coding and building a visualization and all those things. I'm not disagreeing to that fact, but if you can build everything and you cannot translate that to other audience, well, you're not going to succeed no matter what. Nobody is going to use what you built. So communication is definitely one of the core skills. Some kind of problem solving. Expecting that you will have like perfect requirements is simply not possible, because many people don't know what they could do with data. So they're going to just come to you with a problem statement, which is more at a very high level, I would say. And sometimes it's not even at a high level, it is more like you have to really be this kind of investigator to say, oh, this is what you're looking for. And then at the end of, if you spend 15 minutes with that person, you will walk away from the starting to the end, which surprise you. They were going in a completely different direction, and you kind of facilitated that conversation and you said, no, 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 this is not what you want, and this is not the data we collect. So we're not going to be able to deliver on that. So we will maybe use this, and we will do something else. So this is something I would say, curiosity and problem solving, and also communication skills, in my opinion, is very, very at core.
That is the secret sauce to the recipe of thriving in data. And we hear the term really often about data driven culture, particularly from my side as well. A lot of businesses we support with hiring, they're talking about data driven culture. But what does that actually mean?
As with anything, culture is the most tough thing to achieve, right? You can build a technical solution. Yeah, if you had the time, the expertise, and the money, you can build it. But the problem to make people use it is where the struggle comes. So, data culture, and again, some places will do better than others because of the journey. I mean, there is maybe more tech savvy people, there is more willingness, because willingness is something many times missed too. I mean, assuming that everybody is willing to try out your solution is not the case, right? So obviously sometimes you have to be that facilitator to really pitch in your solution. So when I see about data culture, that's what I see. Like one of the struggles is getting that adoption and that transition from non-technical solutions. I mean, whatever they were doing it manually or whatever, they now have to start using data. So this is a very vast area. So, I mean, I'm going to leave it at a very high level. In the book I wrote, I did write about a chapter about data literacy, because data literacy is not something you can achieve overnight. It's a constant, iterative, conscious decision, I would say. And you have to kind of celebrate your small wins, because sometimes people approach it as a saying, like, oh, we want to become data driven. Yeah, great, but it's not going to happen overnight. You have to celebrate. If there was some small thing you accomplished, like which you were doing, sitting and doing for 3 hours manually, and you now have it done in 5 minutes, automated, that's a small win. It's not data driven fully, but you should acknowledge. And also, so for some people, they're slightly on the extreme too. When they say data driven, they think everything has to be automated. That's not the case too. So that balance, so that is why I dedicated a chapter for all the things I'm mentioning.
From your own experiences, what are some of your techniques to start fostering a data driven culture that you've seen work really well?
Setting clear goals, because sometimes when people say let's become data driven, there is like some magic that will happen, but there is not a measure, there is no metric they have established. Like, okay, if I mean, for anything that is very core, right? Otherwise, how would you know you have become data driven? So you have to define that, not just as a complete, rather than as something, okay, in 3 months, I want to be here. In 6 months, I want to be here. Maybe in a year, and then evaluate. You cannot really put a path for like 15 years or 10 years, right? So you kind of take it gradually every quarter, whatever works for your company or your personal goals. Put that and have a clear definition of, because that is missing and misleading many times, where people think I somehow want to become data driven, and these are all the steps I'm taking. That nobody has a problem with. The problem comes when there is no measure to say, um, this is what it would be. And sometimes it's about incentive too, right? I mean, asking everybody to become data driven, some people will be early jumpers on that, like, okay, I could jump on this train because I enjoy. But there will be some people who are passive. They're very happy in their comfortable state, which they're very familiar for so many years, and they don't want to change. And it's okay. So for those people, how would you bring them along? So to foster a culture is not just about the set which is ready to jump on immediately. It is about people who don't want to get into it, and how would you give them some incentive and say, hey, if you do this, you're going to get this in return. How would you show them the value? It's not just monetary always, right? It could be a time driven thing, like, okay, you will save time as a value. It could be better job opportunities. It could be anything. It could be any form of incentive, but you have to bring that crowd a little longer along, right? So that is how you would foster.
Okay, what are some of the benefits of actually having a data driven culture?
If you are not taking advantage of the data, you're going to lose to your competition, right? Because there are other players in the same space who are making better decisions. When during COVID, everybody knows how much of a supply chain problem everybody faced. So if others are making a data driven decision and you are not, you're doing the same way of waiting for a report for 3 weeks to get it delivered to you, and then you'll figure out. You're not very you're very reactive, not very proactive. One is you will lose to the competition. So that's one thing. Another thing is you will spend more money also because you won't build efficiencies. We cannot compare to how 20 years ago it was, right? Now there is more data available. Now you can make use of it for in terms of operational cost, you can save as well by doing that. So those are at least couple of areas where you will lose very fast if you don't become and invest, because data is not just about technology, right? Okay, I'm going to become there is a cost factor, but that is a ROI you have to define. Like, am I ready to spend this, and what is my return on that? If that is not clear, it's tough to really move along.
We've spoke a little bit about data driven cultures, but actually, if we put the magnifying glass on data teams, when it comes to building effective data teams, what are some of the factors that we should be considering building them from the ground up?
I would say building them from a ground up. The things I mentioned, like a balance of everything. Even if as an individual, if you cannot find somebody with all the skills like technical, communication, whatever, as a core team, they should be able to do that. So that collective strength of the team should be all the things I already mentioned, but because it's very important. So somebody only forming a technical team which is very very tech savvy, which can code, is good. It is not going to get anywhere further. So when you form a team from ground up, set those realistic expectation that okay, this is this person's strength. So you kind of bring together an expertise as a collective strength. And also if somebody is good at one thing and they want to learn the other thing, that kind of by bringing a set of people from varied backgrounds and a diverse background will help them to cross learn too, because otherwise what one person knows, that's all they will be doing for the rest of their life. That's not how we see our careers, right? So that is very important. You blend different diverse teams from technical backgrounds, everything, and put them together to handle a problem together. So that will give you two benefits. You will approach the problem with very different kind of solution thinking, so you'll come up with a better solution. And the other thing is you will also build a team which can kind of learn from each other, which is very important because that kind of evolves you as a person. Oh, this person is good at this, and now I can also try and learn from them and experiment. So it's like an exchange of information.
I really love that you've highlighted the importance as well of having that diversity in terms of the experience and complementing one another, because it just highlights how a team coming together, a diverse team, can really thrive. And it's absolutely imperative, right, for all businesses to welcome diversity in the many different layers. And from your own experiences, how can we create these collaborative, inclusive spaces for individuals' growth and development?
It's like a safety net, right? Like, how safe and trust is there within the team? Otherwise, they will compete against each other. So, as long as their work gets appreciated and also people feel confident that they can ask this question, they can show this, and there is not so high like threshold, right? Like in terms of like, oh, if you don't do this correct, you're a failure. It's not set like that. I think that will thrive because as long as people are allowed to experiment, they can fail small and correct from their mistake, not something drastic failure, but at least like something small. So if that is set up in that way, I think there will be a collaboration culture. So that trust has to be built. People should feel trusted between each other in the team.
What are some ways that you build trust in your teams?
I would say I build trust by time, right? It is like, small steps. If you have a very new team, it's like the kind of appreciation you show to them. And, sometimes you cannot micromanage every project, right? So you can build trust by giving them to work on their own and they can come back to you when they need help. So that is how you build trust. Allow them to make their decisions and kind of make them maneuver their way on their own, and also appreciate that they have done something good, and all those things kind of builds trust. But again, in a new team, you cannot expect trust to be in a week. It is a conscious effort, but it works. As long as all the things I mentioned are taken care of, I think trust can be built. It just time investment and patience sometimes, because without patience you cannot build trust as well. You have to be patient. Sometimes it doesn't go the way you want it, and you have to be patient that it will come around.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Time is so important. And I also just want to say congratulations to you because in December 2022, you become a published author. And we were talking for quite a while before that point. So it's really nice to see that. And this is thriving in a data world. So we'd love to know really, who is this for? How would you describe it?
When I was writing this book, two kinds of audience were in my scope. One is somebody who either is moving, transitioning from something to something, I mean, to into data, or they're right out of school or a couple of years in a real world experience. So that is one area. It's not a very technical book at all. It is more like all the things you would need to survive in a data world or thrive in a data world. And the other set of audience who this book will be good for is like managers or above, who would be running a data team. And so all the things like how would you build a team? How would you have an ROI for your project? So all those things. So this book kind of caters to both the needs. So somebody who is very young or very new, by young, I don't mean the age, I just mean like young in terms of experience to enter a data field. So for those people, this will be good because you can kind of sense like to really, if you get into a real job, these are all the things that's expected if you want to succeed. It's not just your technical skills. So this book talks about everything you need to get there. And for if you're a manager or in a hiring place or something, it will show that these are the things you should look for. So that is the purpose of the book. And that is why I mentioned data literacy is a whole dedicated topic, and talk about like data presentation, data storytelling, and a lot of other things it talks about. So that is the style of how the book is written. And that is why it is very tool agnostic. It doesn't talk about coding. It is not meant for that.
Sounds like a really powerful guide to equip yourself to thrive in a data world. And I know you love reading books and just reading different materials. So tell me about that moment where you thought to yourself, I'm gonna write a book.
The moment I thought is not one instance, I would say. It is over a period of time. I read a lot, not just books like online, all those things. And also, I see when I was mentoring people who were trying to enter data field, how they were struggling with some of the areas. So those two things were my driving factor. And also, as a first time author, I wanted to challenge myself, that curiosity aspect for myself too, to go and try to see that how my writing style is. Because I would say for anybody, writing is a lot of time commitment and extreme time management. Otherwise you cannot even finish writing your book if you don't have those skills. And also I would say for anybody who wants to get into writing, there are so many things you have to learn to become a writer, and you have to find your voice, right? Because everybody's style of writing is different. Some people like to write very like a, that's who they are, like a theory or manuscript. Will be full of explanation. For some people, it is more like a casual reading, like it is a pleasure reading. Like, oh, you can pick this book, finish in one sitting. You don't have to put it down. You just read it through, and it's more lightweight. So, as a writer, I had to find that voice for myself in this journey as well, which I kind of feel like I am more inclined to have like a little bit of sense of humor and little bit of like fun to read kind of a person, because I put down books where I feel it is too much of content. It may be great content, but it is so much that your mind starts exploding after a while. I'm not that. So for me, the book has to be very fun to read. It has to provide the value it is trying to say. It shouldn't be like just fun to read, right? It has to provide the value, but it has to be in perfect intervals. You should enjoy the reading, some value like that. So that's how I wrote my book, and that's a voice I found for myself.
How would you describe the timeline of the whole process?
From a timeline, I would say it, it depends on the individual, because like some people, I am more of a person who like to type, so that is who I am. Some people don't, they will talk to it and they want it translated and then they'll go and edit. That's their way. And also some people sit in a stretch and they will write a lot and then try to edit it. I mean, anybody has to be good at editing to write any book. Some people would rather space it out. So everybody's style is different. I would say at least a good 6 months is a minimum commitment, I would say, to write start to finish, because there's a lot of research involved too, right? It's not just putting what is in your mind to words. It is also researching the topic, finding relatable examples, trying to find some information which should be added in your book. So there's a lot that goes on. There may be sketches that's needed which you have to sketch for your book. So there is at least minimum 6 months to more commitment. 6 months, I'm only talking about 3 to 6 months to just write, have the final manuscript ready, and then it depends whether you're going to self-publish, you're going to go with a traditional publisher, whatever your way of publishing it. You should be prepared to invest your time after your 6 months to do multiple edits, because it doesn't matter whether you're publishing yourself or you're going with a traditional publisher. There are some timelines you have to follow to do multiple rounds of edits, right? The copy has to be edited so many times as well to get into this final stage. When you write a book, I think you start appreciating other books that were written, because it's like, otherwise you're like, oh, okay, it's a fun read, it was a 100-page book, okay, fine. But now oh, even to write a 100-page book, it's not that easy. It's a lot of work put into it, and a lot of good content if you want to capture. That's a big time investment.
How did you manage your time as well? What was most effective for you?
I had like an hour or so in the morning to put it, and I will catch up in the weekend. That worked with my schedule. It is more of a commitment to do it continuously, consistently. That is the most important thing. If you miss, oh, I put an hour and I missed like 3 days in a week, it's like going to a gym, right? Oh, I'm dedicated to doing it, but I'm not going to show up most of the time. You're not going to expect results. It's the same with book writing. It's no different. It's not just putting the time on your calendar, you just stick to that plan. And sometimes people are not able to write in that time too, right? So it happens because you're just like blocked, like you don't know you want to write. It's okay, but you have to still make that attempt. And that consistency, I think, is very critical to finish writing a book. Otherwise, you'll have the way you pick on a book and don't finish reading it. It's the same way you'll start writing your book, you'll never finish it.
Okay, that's really good to know. And I know that you spent a lot of time discovering your voice, finding your style and what worked for you. What other new skills and things did you have to learn in order to write this book?
Editing is a skill I had to learn. And I would say the one other skill is putting in the shoes of the reader is a skill not everybody has, right? Because most of the time you're reading a book, so you read, you interpret. But when you're writing, you have to kind of go from this other side where you have to see, okay, if I am saying this message, how would it be interpreted? Will it be useful? And also, you should have the assumptions to the minimum based on your audience, unless you're writing a super expert book where you kind of assume everybody who is reading this book kind of knows all these other XYZ. If it is not such a book, you have to kind of understand that you may be knowing this, but the person doesn't know this. So you have to kind of balance like how much explanation is good. At the same time, you don't want to spend 3 pages explaining that. So how much you should spend explaining before you move on to the topic.
Thinking about actually the lessons that you've now learned, because it's out there, it's published. For your next book, what lessons are you going to apply to that?
I would say couple of things, like marketing is something I would pay more attention to, because that as a first time author, you're not sure like how much your publisher is going to take care of, how much you have to take care of. You kind of don't know. Um, or deciding between even like whether you want to self-publish, if it is for you, if you're ready to do a self-publishing. So those kind of assessing I would definitely do. And my first book, I definitely wanted to go a traditional route. That is why it is traditionally published. One other thing as a lesson learned, I would say, is a table of contents, like how you modify it. I mean, obviously, in my first book, I have done like multiple iterations, and then finally I eliminated some chapters, whatever. So sometimes I kind of feel like if I write a second book, I would kind of leave it alone and then come back to it later, because it kind of, as you write more chapters, you feel, oh, this doesn't make sense based on what I'm writing. So you don't have to put so much effort to kind of fine tune it. Rather, you can let it go, whatever version it is, and you will kind of catch up later.
Great lessons. Thank you for sharing. And just on the topic of books, what for you has been the most long-lasting positive impact from books you've read?
My sweet spot for picking a book to read is like, I don't want a super bulky book. That's not for me. Like if it is, because, and this we're talking nonfiction, right? I mean, fiction is something different. I get it. Fiction is like, okay, it could be a 700-page book. But when I'm picking a nonfiction book, it has to be more my investment of time, what I get out of it. So I normally try to pick something less than 250 pages for the most part. There are exceptions to this rule. Then the second thing is I check on the reviews, but not so much, because it helps if it is, because sometimes if it's a huge seller too, you may not like the style of writing. So I still pick books based on, like, I read like what is there in the cover, whatever is trying to tell, the table of contents. And if I can resonate with the table of contents, I'll still book. I mean, I'm not so picky in terms of like, okay, the reviews of this book had been, because I mean, the couple of times the reviews were not that great, but I enjoyed the book. So it's like I kind of do that. But there is this book called Everybody Lies. There is a book which is about, it's not about like technical, but it talks about how data could be used to manipulation also. I mean, it kind of brings that visibility. And if I have to book pick, something like very very old book, there is like How to Lie with Statistics. It's a very old book, super old book, but it's still in circulation, and people read that, and I've read it. So there are lots of books, so that's why I named 2 3 books here, but I cannot really pinpoint to one book which has inspired, because I kind of felt like every book taught me something for me to learn more. So that is why I continuously read, because otherwise it would be like, oh, I read one book, I'm now great with it. So
Thank you so much. It has been an absolute honor speaking with you today. Loved it. Thank you so much for your time.
thanks a lot. I had a great time. Your discussion was very interactive and a lot of fun questions I could answer. So thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to today's episode, and we hope you're feeling inspired. If you are, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, and join us on our mission to create a diverse, inclusive, and equitable universe. This podcast is brought to you by Equal IT, a mission-driven business working to diversify tech teams through refined talent acquisition, complemented by diversity and inclusion consulting. As an Azure Heroes inclusive leader, we aim for teams to cultivate a strong sense of belonging and equity. Find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We welcome your feedback, questions, and would love to hear from you. Join us next time on Equal Inspired.